Fantasy sports fans, listen up. Did you know that your chances of winning on draft are 80% better than on salary cap sites? That's right, 80%. That's why draft is my favorite fantasy site. No more getting crushed by the pros, and it's not just me. More than 1 million people that have already downloaded Draft 2. Play in a real live NBA draft right now. Be done in under 5 minutes and get paid out the very next day. Drafts are filling up every second, so you can join one whenever you want. All new players get a free entry into a real money draft when you make your first deposit, but you have to use my promo code B2B. That's B2B. That's right, play in a real money draft for free just by using my promo code B2B. But it gets even better. Draft is so sure you'll love it that they're even offering back-to-back listeners a money-back guarantee of up to $100. Just search Draft in your app store or go to draft.com and come play free right now with promo code B2B. Welcome to a Thursday edition of the Back-to-Back podcast. It's the Nerd Pod, and I say that with utmost affection for how smart we are. That's Coach Thorpe, as always, on the show. Welcome, Coach. How's the tank top doing?
Fine and dandy. I always forget that I'm wearing one until you ask. And
yeah, sure.
I am guilty of wearing a tank top again.
Well, it's time for some hot takes because we have the hot take extraordinaire, Ben Falk of cleaningtheglass.com, a paid subscription site with the smartest NBA stuff. He is the former VP of the Philadelphia 76ers, and also spent 6 years with the Blazers and is now joining the show. I couldn't be more excited for this guest. What's going on, Ben?
Not too much. I'm just enjoying some playoff basketball.
Yes. And you have an amazing site with great breakdowns from some of my favorite people in this world. Actually, Steve Jones Jr., as affectionately called Pork Chop. He was in Coop Moorhead's wedding that we were both in, and we were groomsmen for Coop Moorhead's wedding. And he is now doing breakdowns for your site, coaching breakdowns. He did a great one for you guys. Utah OKC, which played out pretty nicely last night. So, where do you want to begin here, Ben? You obviously, this is an amazing time for NBA fans, but you have extreme experience in this because in your first few years with the Blazers, you guys were outed in the playoffs in 6 games after some highs and some lows. What is it like on the outside watching these playoffs after your experience with the Blazers?
So it's been fun to just be able to sit back and kind of take in. I mean, this has been fun throughout running my site, now being out of the league, just being able to study the game in a way that you can't really when you're in the thick of things. You kind of have to wait till the dust settles in the off season. And then that's if you have time, you're not involved with the draft or free agency or anything like that. But there's, I've always felt like there's a lot you can learn from the regular season, but the playoffs takes that to a new level. And so there's so much going on in terms of all the little tactical battles and kind of these strategic themes throughout all the series to learn about how the modern NBA is evolving, to learn about how these teams were successful and why, to learn about players, all of that. And so it's just been, I definitely miss the competition. I miss the intensity, but it's been nice to kind of be able to step back and really take it all in.
Yeah, it's an amazing testament to where we are in the NBA right now that, Coach, I know you were big on this earlier, is the Rockets missed 36 3-pointers last night and blew out the Minnesota Timberwolves. They missed 36 threes. They shot 16 of 52, and they won by 20 points. And the reason I bring that up is because the Minnesota Timberwolves could not be any more different in terms of their playing style. They have not shot 36 3-pointers in any game this season, and they also have not shot 36 threes in this series, period. So, Ben, you were kind of ahead of the curve a little bit with the 76ers. You guys took the 5th most threes in the NBA in 2015, even though you had one of the worst percentages as like a basketball analytics 101. Can you explain why we're seeing such a surge of 3-pointers in today's NBA?
Yeah, I mean, so just even touching on what you said about the Sixers, I mean, what we were doing then was we were trying to play a style that when we got the right players, we could plug into that style, that we'd be playing a way that succeeds particularly in the playoffs, and can succeed at a very high level. And so I think that's kind of what you're touching on. A lot of what you look at is just, it's kind of the math of a mid-range shot versus a three. A three is worth 1.5 times what a 2-pointer is worth, right? But the percentages don't go down by 1.5 times by taking a few steps back behind the line. That said, I think, basketball is fascinating to me because it's so complex. And so it's not as simple as saying, like, let's just spread it out and shoot a bunch of threes. There's obviously within any given scenario, there are situations in which you can say, okay, that might be better to take a mid-range shot here. This might be better in terms of the way our setup works, to create more shots at the basket, or, it can give you trade-offs that end up in your favor, even if you're not taking as many threes. But I think the ultimate is what Houston has created, which is you have these fantastic pick and roll ball handlers who can put pressure on the rim, particularly James Harden, who can just really attack, but also find shooters, find rollers, and then you just spread out around that with elite shooting. And it's incredibly difficult to stop because as a defense, you are trying to take away two opposite locations. You're trying to protect the basket, which is the highest percentage shot. But at the same time, you also have to be far away from the basket to protect against shooters. And so you have this, kind of fascinating tactical back and forth as teams try to stop this machine where, what are the trade-offs that you can make? You have to basically pick your poison and say, we're not going to really stop them. We're not even going to really contain them. We're just going to try to push the odds in our favor a little bit and make the best decisions that we can.
Coach, did you see this trend happening, 10 years ago, 5 years ago? Because it wasn't like this happened overnight, but it also, back in 2011, 2012, this would have been lunacy to think of a team making or missing 36 shots in a playoff game and still blowing out the opponent.
Oh, I saw the origin of this way back. I worked Rick Pitino's camp in Lexington. That I think it's his second year. It was the year they ended up losing on that Leitner shot. So I was there that summer prior, and all of his assistant coaches became great or good head coaches. And he had been there 1 year after coming from Providence, and everyone in the camp shot threes nonstop. And so we sat around at night, those of us that were, kind of just, we knew basketball was going to be in our lives forever. We would speculate at night what was going to happen in the game. And I just think the NBA got late to it for a lot of reasons that has been written about and talked about. Some guys adopted it, most guys didn't. But this is what I always expected it to be. And then Ben brings up really what the crutch of the challenge is. And I'm dealing with this now as I help all these different high school and AAU teams that my son's involved in, or just friends that I am helping who are coaching even in Europe. When Ben says pick your poison, you hope you get to pick your poison. Minnesota can't pick their poison because they can't defend the rim. So what you see teams like Utah and Portland do is find the gigantic man. Mm-hmm. And you, Ben, probably remembers this too. I helped a young man out early in his career named Kirilla Fishenko from the Ukraine, who 1 year, according to John Hollinger, told me was the most effective defensive player in the league for minutes played. And I tried to get him to understand that he is going to be in the NBA a long time and make many, many, many millions of dollars if he could get his act right and just be focused every day and all that, because he really could protect the rim. He was just gigantic and agile and loved and just a great personality. Unfortunately, he had other issues, because if you can just park a guy at the rim more or less, when Ben says, when you talk about picking your poison, we always talk about you can't do both. You can't defend the rim and the three at the same time. The exception is when you have that enormous man who's agile, can play in space. You'll see a lot of big guys like Karl Anthony Towns. He has a few issues defensively, but maybe his biggest issue is he has just still no clue how to guard two people at the same time. One guy with the ball, one guy without. He commits too much to the ball, gives up the lob. He stays too far back and gives up the simple floater. there's a talent and something you can teach to defend in space that we're not doing a very good job with our big guys now in America, but it's going to start coming because as everyone starts shooting threes more and more, you got to take, I have a 6'11", 7-foot sophomore in high school on my son's team now, and he's 175 pounds. He was 140 a year ago. So he has a long way to go. But as he gets some strength and he's starting to get coordinated now, dunking with somewhat ease and all of that, he's only 16 or 15. We're going to have to teach him how to play in space because you can't just sit at the rim. Every guard, hell, every big guy. Look at Steven Adams. All these guys can make little push shots or floaters. So you've got to be able to get out and defend and then retreat quickly or come out early and then get back to defend the lob like Gobert does a good job of that. It's really hard to do both. But that's what you have to do because you can't just stay home and give a three, and you can't just take the three and give these amazing players, even at the college and high school level now, easy runways to the rim for dunks and finishes.
Yeah, Ben, you wrote a great piece about Robin Lopez and his kind of underrated ability to grab rebounds, or not grab rebounds, but raise your rebound percentage because he does the nitty gritty stuff and blocking out, right? What are some of the things that you have learned in terms of being behind the scenes with Terry Stotts in Portland on just how hard it is for big men to thrive defensively in the NBA?
I mean, so, as Coach Thorpe talked about, there's a lot of complexity to being a good defensive big man. And I think sometimes we take that for granted. And so we look at these young players and these young big men, they have to take in and learn so much. And it's not just learn about the game, but translate it into instinct. One of the things I'm fascinated by is how early does that happen? So when we talk about the draft and you talk about someone like DeAndre Ayton, who seems to be lacking some of that, the question that scouts have to figure out is, okay, well, how easy is it going to be for us to get him to pick that up, for us to teach that to him? So there's the old adage, you can't teach height, but can you teach this other stuff? Maybe, but maybe not. Maybe, this is something that he's going to struggle with for a while. And so, you look at somebody like a Robin Lopez. Robin Lopez was like this at Stanford. Obviously, he learned things. He grew in the league. It took him some time, but he still was a rim protector. He still was good at boxing out, back in college, and it's likely before that as well. And so, Coach Thorpe, what he was saying was great because it was really talking about how the evolution of the game has put even more pressure on big men. That always was your last line of defense. That always was the most important thing on the defensive end, but it's put even more pressure on it because the shooting has made it so that you just can't help as much. Intelligent shifts into the paint, intelligent help is still very important, but perimeter defenders have to be much more judicious in their decisions to help because if they do it at the wrong time or they give up too much space, it's an open three. And so, big men now have a huge responsibility to really they're kind of the tent pole to your entire defense, and they have to make so many reads and have so many reactions in a very short period of time that it becomes more about what's upstairs than the physical than it has been in the past.
Well, I want to add one thing to that when you talk about evolution. As you guys know, my very first client was Udonis way back rookie year in Miami. And I remember the very first time I broke down a game for a player at that level. I was watching film from it. He started his first game. I think I was there actually. So it might have been 2 days later. I broke it down on film, and just in one possession, the number of decisions he had to make instantly, which any mistake would result in a dunk or an easy basket or a wide open shot, was just almost every other second he had to make those kind of calls, and none of it, unless we guarded Dirk, involved a three-point shot. All of it was around the paint. And now we got to do, as helping big guys out, all those same things. That hasn't changed. And I'm a subscriber to Ben's site, and I don't know that people are on there a lot more than me, but I don't think there's a lot of people on there a lot more than me. I'm on there all day, every day, pretty much. There are so many incredibly tough actions to defend as a big, And they also include having to defend out in space, rotate out in space. So it's immeasurably more difficult now. And I think I want to pick up one other thing that Ben said, which I greatly appreciate because it's something that I've been talking about for a long time. I call it teaching instinct. It's wrong, and this is something we see all the time. People think our instincts are innate in us, and it's just a myth. What I always say is, your instinct was to touch that hot pan when you were 4 on the counter of the kitchen till you got burned. And you quickly learned an instinct, which is when you suspect something is hot, you don't touch it. It's something we do in basketball all the time. We're having to totally, in fact, I would say arguably, most basketball players' instincts are wrong. They result in turnovers and bad shots, unless they're lucky enough to have maybe as a coach, as a dad. My son's got decent instincts because I've never let him have anything but. That's one thing about coaches' sons or daughters. So we've got to do so much teaching. One reason why I kind of get out of draft preparation is I did it for so long. And I mean, listen, I'm spoiled. These were the best players in the world at grade going into the NBA. But it was teaching like the same grad school class every year. I got bored out of my mind teaching the same unbelievably basic instincts that, absent that, you'd be in trouble in the NBA, that they didn't matter in college. They just could get by with it for different reasons. But you have to teach these fundamentals or you got no shot. And so the point on the Arizona kid, it's true. You can have a great student and a bad teacher, and they may not learn. You can have a great teacher and a bad student, and he won't learn. Both those combinations are devastating for a player's progress. There's few guys that can figure it out no matter what. Those are the ones that no matter where they go, they succeed. Most players need help. We see that in evidence nonstop. Ricky Rubio last night playing the way he's played really much of the year, and certainly at the end of the season and last night, making, to me, the most important 3 of the game was his 3 in a tie game. And I think 4 minutes to go. Quinn's done something for him that nobody else could do. That we see that in the NBA more than we don't see it. A coach unlocking a player.
Yeah, that was quite a game last night. Donovan Mitchell taking over late after struggling in the first half. I thought he had some really good looks around the rim. Like if you look at his shot chart, it's all at the rim or 3-pointer, and he went 0 for 7 from deep. And he was getting to the rack. He just wasn't finishing. But I think Mike Prada had a really good insight on Twitter earlier today about how he just became a lot more assertive in the pick and roll and not waiting, not hesitating. And he made that adjustment with a quick attack in the pick and roll when the Thunder defenders would come at him. And it was over from there. And the Thunder weren't able to hit a shot. I think the big 3, if you want to call it that, I know we think pretty harshly about Carmelo Anthony these days. But the big 3 in OKC were 0 for 14 in the fourth quarter. And yes, there's some randomness there. Yes, they probably had some good shots,
They
good
took
looks.
a bunch of bad shots.
But look, guys, yeah, this Jazz team, it seems like they're younger. It seems like they're led by a rookie who shouldn't be doing the things that he's doing. But what were some of the things that jumped out to you, Coach, watching that game? And Donovan Mitchell, who right now has scored more points in his first 2 games of his playoff career than any player in NBA history.
So going backwards, in game 1, the Thunder clearly were trying to play off him because he's such a good driver, and that didn't work out great. They were much more aggressive at the beginning of game 2, especially after the Thunder frequently, at least late in the season, start so listlessly at the beginning of games. They know they're a good team, and it's to their detriment. Every point counts, every possession counts, and I don't think they always get that. So they had a worse start in game 1, recovered fine. They had a bad start in game 2, recovered quicker, and got into Mitchell, and I think got him off rhythm a little bit. They challenged him, and that was something different than the game before. And 2 things happened in the second half. Donovan Mitchell made some incredible shots. I mean, they actually played good defense, I thought, on many of the Mitchell attempts. You remember when Derrick Rose, who couldn't shoot, but you knew he was going to the rim and he finished anyway. He was powerful. I used to call him LeBron James at point guard. He was athletic and powerful. So is Donovan Mitchell. With Mitchell may have more craft. Certainly as a rookie he does. So he's got a little feel for the crafty part of scoring. So that happened. But the Thunder they had a lead going to the fourth quarter. The second unit laid down, other than Jeremy Grant, I think has been very good. And then, as I've been saying all along since I've been studying them, I just think Russell Westbrook's game management sucks. And it doesn't help to have Carmelo just jacking shit, which is what he was doing. I mean, if you don't know what someone, when they say he's just jacking the ball, if you don't know what that means, watch Carmelo Anthony play right now. The ball's barely in his fingertips, and he's shooting it from 26 feet guarded. That's jacking the ball.
Well, why do you think he's doing that? Why do you think he's doing that?
I wouldn't even begin to guess, other than I do think he thinks he's going to make it. As I tweeted earlier, I think he's 9 for his last 41. Now, part of that was an 0 for 9 game. So still 9 for 32 in the other games is still not great. He had a nice 3-game stretch right before this bad stretch where he shot it great. But other than that, he's not as good a shooter as he thinks he is. He knows that if he doesn't get it early, he may not get it back. I blame that's part of on Russell. I don't know what Billy Donovan can do because I don't think Russell really cares what anyone says. And until look at it this way. Donovan Mitchell, who's a better shooter than Russell Westbrook, relentlessly attacked. Russell Westbrook, who's a better driver than Donovan, didn't and doesn't. He's just so hit and miss. He took one of the worst threes I've ever seen in that game, not to mention Melo's threes. And this is what it is with the Thunder. They just don't manage games. They don't start games great. They don't finish games great. And in the middle, they're pretty good. They're darn good, actually. I still think it can go 6 or 7 games, which I thought it would go 7 to begin with. I still kind of feel that way. But, Paul George was so good in game 1. He couldn't bail him out in game 2. And because of that, they're just a hard team to bank on.
Tim McMahon from ESPN, a friend of the program, had a great story yesterday walking through a film session with Donovan Mitchell and the coaching staff for the Utah Jazz. And it just seemed like this guy's been in the league for 10 years on the court and off the court. Ben, how rare is it to have a guy who's not just a leader in the scoring column, but also takes so much pride in the craft at this young age?
I mean, I think that's one of the big challenges of player acquisition is you start to go down the list of the qualities that you want a player to have. You can look at on the court, off the court. You can look at kind of just medical, like injury, how injury prone they are, any of that kind of stuff. And you really start to narrow down that list pretty quick. When you find the players that have nothing wrong with them, those are pretty much the ungettable players in the league. And so because of that, as you know, when you're in a front office, you have to decide, what are we okay with? What are we willing to give, it's another pick your poison type of thing. What are we willing to live with? And so if you can find the guys that check as many of those boxes as possible, it is incredibly rare. And, hearing some of the stories about Donovan Mitchell and seeing how his rookie season has played out, it actually reminded me a lot of Damian Lillard, when I was in Portland for his rookie year, where there's just something about them from a personality standpoint, to the earlier discussion, that is uncommon for other players in terms of their how even keeled they are, kind of like a quiet confidence about them, or not so quiet sometimes, but just kind of unshakable confidence, and then an ability to learn, an ability to adjust very quickly. From a front office perspective, it's difficult to tell how to identify that beforehand. There's plenty of guys with great character and seem like they're great, and they just don't have it on the court, or they aren't able to develop the way they need to, because there's a lot that goes into that. But when you find it, you tend to know pretty quickly. And so, with Damian, we almost knew from day one. And, you talk to some of the people with the Jazz and they say the same thing with Donovan Mitchell. So I think there are some real similarities there. Just in terms of an ability from a mental standpoint to understand the game, adjust to the game, and grow at a very rapid pace.
Where were you when Damian Lillard hit the 3 against Houston?
So this is actually somewhat of a funny story because it was a home game, and so I should have been in the arena, but for religious reasons I actually couldn't go since it was a Friday night. So I was unaware of that happening until I saw the game. I managed not to find out the result until I saw the game on Saturday night when I could. I mean, the first thing, as soon as I could, I downloaded the game and I watched it, so it felt like it was live to me. And then, by myself in my apartment, I'm like running around pumping my fist. So I feel it's difficult that I wasn't there in the arena for it. But I still kind of got to experience the roller coaster that was that game.
Wait, that is crazy to me. Like you had to experience it by yourself, essentially? Even though you're in the trenches the whole season with the Portland Trailblazers, you probably helped them in some way, put them in that position. So you had to do it. You had to watch it like on DVR, essentially.
Yeah, basically. So it was the unfortunate aspect of that game being on a Friday night. There's nothing I could really do from a religious perspective, and so. So I mean, I just made sure not to find out at all what happened. I didn't have it spoiled for me, but luckily the result was good. I feel like the double whammy if he hadn't made that shot and Chandler Parsons' basket was the last basket of that game, that would have been tough to deal with as well.
Yeah.
So wait, Ben. So you observe the Sabbath and don't have any TV on?
Yeah.
So you're really Jewish, because I always say I'm Jewish as a Reformed Jew. I have family and close friends who say they're Orthodox, and they make sure whatever game they want to watch on a Friday night or a Saturday, that channel's on, that TV's on before sundown on Friday night, and they claim that that's okay.
Yeah, so we're going to get a little bit into the weeds of a Jewish legal discussion here, but I mean, essentially it boils down to there's kind of in my personal opinion, there's kind of a spirit of the law versus letter of the law. So technically, the letter of the law is you can watch that, but the idea of the day is a break from work.
Right.
And so for me, this being a work type of event.
Oh, that's true. Okay.
So I was.
Well, would you put CNN on?
I mean, I wouldn't prefer to do that anyways. So So I mean, I think not having the TV on in general is something that, I mean, I think it just adds a different quality of the day. So
that's the
try not to have the TV on. So I don't do that personally. But that's whether it's allowed legally or not is a separate question.
Right. Now, moving on, Tom. I'm just curious.
Well, I mean, we can continue in this space because I appreciate this as a DNP rest advocate, like in the last couple of years.
Yeah.
The idea of like stepping away and not getting bogged down. I mean, I think that space is a little bit therapeutic in ways that we probably don't appreciate enough, is this idea of like, sometimes you're too into the weeds with a playoff series, or too into the weeds with your job, or too into the weeds with what in life. Right.
Yeah.
And I think about that a lot during the playoffs, is this idea of, are we overreacting to game one, or overreacting to a single play? Are we overreacting to a single play call? And I wonder if that space is actually really therapeutic, is stepping back and seeing the big picture. Because in the playoffs, it just seems like there's so much of a pendulum back and forth. Like, oh, the Cleveland Cavaliers are in trouble. LeBron James is gone. And then suddenly he drops 46 and 12, and then like everything's okay again. Right. So as someone who was part of the process, Ben, how hard was it as an employee of the front office of the franchise to watch your team lose a whole bunch of games and still stay the course? Because that must have been tough. We're all competitors, but having that space of mind, that long-term view, that must have been tough.
So that was a very impressive segue just in general. And I think you touched on a lot of things that all have that same core thread of maintaining perspective in them. I think that it is very difficult to maintain perspective in many of the aspects of, parts of the NBA calendar, and many of the aspects of NBA front office or coaching jobs. And the reality is, though, is that a long-term view has significant benefits, particularly, I mean, so you talked about small sample and not overreacting to something that might just be fluky or random, but also from a competitive standpoint. Jeff Bezos, who's the founder of Amazon, he talks a lot about how, I think actually in his initial letter to shareholders, he talked about how his main advantage was taking the long view. And he said, if I can compete against people who are optimizing for 2 or 3 years from now, but I'm optimizing for 7 years from now, I don't have to do anything better than them, but I'll beat them in the end. You just need to have that runway. And so being able to have that long view has significant advantages. One of the interesting things to me about basketball in general in the NBA is that it's a completely competitive enterprise, which means that it has these important features that make it different from a lot of other things we try to do. So if you think about something, it's all relative is I guess my point. If you think about something like we want to get to the moon, you either get to the moon or you don't. You have a goal and then you get there or you don't. But in basketball, the goal is beating everybody else. So all that matters is what you do in comparison to everybody else. So I often say as an example, I'm like, if tomorrow I figured out a way to make all of the players on my team shoot 90% from 3, that's great. It seems like I'll dominate the league unless the entire league figures out a way to make them all shoot 95%, and then I'm the worst team in the league. There's no absolute goal. It's all relative to what to what everyone else is doing. And because of that, that means everything that you do has to be viewed through this lens of comparative advantage. How do I gain an advantage relative to everybody else? And one of those key comparative advantages, if you can do it, is to have a long view, is to have perspective, and to look over the course of multiple years. And so that's why it kind of rubs me the wrong way when everyone said what we were doing in Philly was anti-competitive, or that we were trying to lose. To me, I was always like, it just depends on what time frame you're looking on. I thought it was one of the most competitive things you could do. Everyone in the organization from ownership on down was taking on significant risk, but completely for a competitive goal, because we believed that it was going to help us gain an advantage and have a better chance of achieving the highest goal there is in sports, which is winning a championship. And so, there was nothing anti-competitive about it. If anything, it was uber competitive. And we just took a different path than other people. But I think, to the point that you made, it's that perspective and that long-term view that was key throughout all of that. Because like you said, you're losing in the short term. And for us, it was always kind of focusing on that North Star of, okay, we're optimizing for a point beyond what everyone else is right now. We're not trying to be good in 1 year or 2 years or 3 years, but we're trying to be very, very good beyond that.
And wasn't it like also one of the misconceptions about the process, in my opinion, is that it was about losing as many games as possible? Sure, that was I think a byproduct of the overall strategy, but I think also how much was it of getting swings up to bat when it comes to getting high draft picks? Because a lot of the process mentality is cloaked in the idea of losing games, as many games as possible. But a lot of the trades that Sam Hinkie did, it was like, hey, let's try to get as many opportunities to get high draft picks as possible, whether that's drafting guys who might be overseas for a year or drafting guys who might be coming back from an injury like Nerlens Noel. How much of it was, hey, people don't have the long-term view to get a Joel Embiid because they want a guy who plays tomorrow. But what if we rehab him back and have the ability to like take the long view on Joel Embiid and not be so microwave 30 seconds? How much was the process, the drafting strategy of having a lot of hacks at the plate?
Yeah, I think you touch on a good point, which is there's a lot of different strategic things that go into this idea of a long-term rebuild. And trying to do it in a way that optimizes your chance of success. So, to your point, I always bristled a little bit when people were like, they're just trying to lose as many games as possible. Because I was like, if we were doing that, they would have signed me to a contract. I would have been out there playing. There's an intelligent way to go about rebuilding.
What does Ben Falk look like on the court? Like, what kind of game does he have?
So we were talking about this earlier. I compare myself. I try to play like Steve Blake. That's my goal. I can't say that I succeed in that, but try to be pass first, shoot if we need it, be tough. I'm not really a finisher around the rim.
No.
So yeah, it wouldn't have gone so well. Let's just put it that way.
But if you got with coach, you'd be able to be coached up to be an NBA player. Right?
Yeah. I think there are limits beyond what coaching, I have certain physical limits that even coaching couldn't help. But I mean, so, what we were trying to do was we were trying to give opportunities to see players who we thought were potentially better than other people regarded them as. So, a lot of the issues with other NBA teams is you have limited roster spots, and there are players who you might find intriguing, but to get them on your roster, to give them a chance to develop, to give them real playing time and see how they play in an NBA game is difficult. And we had that opportunity. And so you ended up being able to find players like Robert Covington and like TJ McConnell, who might not have got an opportunity otherwise. I mean, these were undrafted free agents who we brought in and were able to develop and give a real opportunity, and they've turned into legitimate NBA players. So that's one portion of it. To your point, there was a lot of humility around, we thought we were doing some interesting things to try to give us an edge in the draft, but there was a lot of humility around just looking at the history of the draft and seeing that even the best drafters get it wrong all the time. And so really, you can increase your odds probably in a lot of different ways, intelligent scouting, using data to help make better picks, but maybe the best way is getting a better pick. And so having enough cracks at that, having enough picks is obviously important as well. But you can't just reduce it to let's just lose and then we'll suddenly be better. There's a lot of strategic thinking that went into, again, how to optimize for the future, how to win years from now as opposed to this year or next year.
Back-to-back pod listeners, I got a deal for you. Buying tickets to sports and concerts can be complicated and confusing, but there is a better way to buy with SeatGeek. SeatGeek is the smartest, easiest way to get tickets to every type of live event, whether you're searching for a last-minute deal, planning a night out, or you need to find the perfect gift for your girl or your guy. SeatGeek is there to help you find the best seats at the best prices, fully guaranteed. There's nothing quite like seeing your favorite team or musician in person, and SeatGeek will get you closer to the action for a great value. I have the SeatGeek app on my phone, and it's by far the easiest way I've found to shop for tickets. I can be anywhere, and with just a few taps, I can instantly find seats.
I just used SeatGeek to find not sports tickets, but Hall & Oates. It's one of my favorite bands, duos, whatever you call it. Hall & Oates tickets coming to Charlotte June 18th, and SeatGeek was essential to finding the best value. I got like an 8.8 rating on the tickets. Great deal. Easy to find. I got to be there for Private Eyes. Should I start singing? Private Eyes, watching you.
So SeatGeek is super nerdy. It's in the title, geek, and it saves time and money by searching for multiple ticket sites to compare prices and find amazing deals. It's color-coded. You don't have to do the math. I don't have to get out my well-worn calculator. I don't have to do all that stuff. It does the hard work for me. SeatGeek grades every ticket based on value to help you immediately identify the best seats that fit your budget. And every purchase is fully guaranteed, so you can shop for tickets on SeatGeek with confidence. Make SeatGeek your go-to app for finding the best deals on every type of ticket, from sports to concerts to comedy and theater. So, all my listeners here on the Back-to-Back pod, you get $20 off your first SeatGeek purchase. Just download the SeatGeek app and enter promo code B2B. That's B, the number 2B. Promo code B2B for $20 off your first SeatGeek purchase. Go geek out with me.
Coach, what is the thing that amazes you most about the way the 76ers play now? Because last year there were 20, I think, how many wins did 76ers have? Like 26 last year? How a guy, Joel Embiid, who hadn't had 50 games to his name in the NBA is so good, and Ben Simmons, who hadn't played a single game, is so good already. And they might have the best.
That helps a lot, right? That helps a lot. Having elite level talent makes a big difference. The one thing, and I've talked to Sam Hinkie about this a lot. I mean, everything Ben said is great. He's obviously a brilliant guy, and as much as I hated what the Sixers did for a lot of reasons, they didn't make the rules. So
right.
They didn't do a single thing wrong based on the rules. That was on the NBA. There's no doubt in my mind that they wanted to lose games. That Ben can argue all he wants. I don't think they only wanted to lose games, and I also don't think I don't think it was any black and white issue with them. I think they were smart, nuanced franchise. And one of the interesting things that no one really talks about with the Sixers, which is going to answer your question, Tom, is the reality when Ben and Sam eloquently say that we wanted to play real fast, and we all know the reasons why now, and I agree with them totally on that idea. It's a false narrative if you only consider the players, because there's almost no one on that team that was losing all those games, right? There's a few, but what a brilliant laboratory for the coaching staff and management. I can
can't do it without Ish Smith, Coach. Can't do it without Ish. Can't do it.
Right. What I can only guess the amount of work behind the scenes that the staff did in terms of what's working, when does this work, how best can this work, what kinds of players, talents, and skill levels mesh with what we've learned is working better in this style. Not to mention management, which is no longer there. But that thought process of evaluating and projecting based on what you see in the lab, it was great. But Brett Brown's who's by far most benefited from the decisions of the process to play really fast with bad players, which only allows your team to lose more often in terms of a probability scale. The more possessions you have with inferior talent, the better probability there is you're going to lose the game. But I would think Brett Brown's become a genius, an expert at how to play this way, and I think the evidence is there. I think JJ Redick probably doesn't get and I would love I don't know how much Ben knows now about JJ's role, but I've been a fan for a long time. I think he really helps ground them, and this goes back to your point about Donovan Mitchell. One of the biggest issues, if not the biggest issue with young players, is lack of attention to detail in terms of their mindset. It doesn't mean you can't get them focused on something. It does mean they tend not to want to focus on it for long. And dads can tell this stories just like coaches can. That's part of what experience gives us. It isn't just the necessarily knowledge. It's more of the valuing of the time needed to gain that knowledge day to day. Donovan Mitchell clearly is not typical for a young man if he's spending the kind of time he's spending working on the things he's working on and studying. I think the Sixers have they're grounded more than I would have expected. And I think JJ has a big part of that. I thought that before he said publicly the other day, there is no next year in a sense that we need to take advantage of this right now. And he's right. You don't know what the future is going to hold. I promise you, the Phoenix Suns didn't realize that Camelot situation they had was going to be over as fast as it was. And there's lots of teams that would tell similar stories. The Sixers have the good fortune of having JJ that's helped them. So when I watch them play, I see a more mature team than what you might expect to see. And then the other thing is Simmons alone is spectacularly special. And I'd like to see him learn to shoot. I think he can learn to shoot. I understand why he has not learned to shoot. It hasn't mattered. He's a brilliant, special talent that just elevate. We used to talk about if I'm in a boat and you're in a boat and we're equal as rowers in terms of our abilities as rowers, but I'm in a stream and you're in a stream parallel to each other, and my stream flows faster, I'm going to beat you every time. Ben Simmons makes the stream flow faster, just like LeBron does. That's what the best players do. And they're fortunate to have that. And that's the point of the process to begin with. To get a player like that just gets everything going much faster.
And to your point about Brett Brown and the coaching staff, it kind of ties into what you're talking about in terms of attention to detail and teaching little points. Obviously they deserve a ton of credit, not only for, weathering all of those losses, right, and continuing to build a culture and continuing to focus on the long term. But one of the things they learned was teaching lots of players over and over and over again on very basic fundamental things. And so they had a lot of opportunity to work on teaching, to know that, we're teaching for the long term, and to focus on how best to do that. How do you implement a process within the team to make it easier to teach and make it more effective to teach in these ways? And so there certainly was, kind of a lot of opportunity there to optimize coaching and to learn from that standpoint and to build a culture from the ground up. I think all of those things were really important and a focus of ours, and something that Brett and the coaching staff has done very, very well. And then on top of that, you also have the types of players that were plugged in, and type of young players that then get plugged into that system. And so, as you're talking about with Ben Simmons, and Joel is the same way. We've been talking throughout this whole time about basketball intellect. Both of them are elite on that level. So, there's a bunch of really good Joel stories that just talk about just how. So there's the famous ones learning off of Hakeem Olajuwon footwork tape, but he is probably the most intelligent and best basketball learner I've ever been around or seen.
What's an example of that?
So, he's obsessed with basketball. He's constantly watching it. But, one of the good stories that we had was, so after that first year sitting out, it seemed like the bone was healed. He had been cleared to play 5-on-5. And so it was during the playoffs, and he was on the practice court playing, and all of a sudden he's going in the post, and he starts doing, I think it was during maybe the Clippers-Spurs series. I don't know if I have that year right, but the Spurs were in the playoffs. Tim Duncan was in the playoffs, posting up, doing that kind of inside, I don't know the exact terminology for it, but kind of this inside sweep move that Duncan does, where he uses his inside hand in the post.
Right.
And
seal almost.
What?
To seal or?
No. So let's say, he turns to the right, to the defender, and goes over his right shoulder and uses his right hand. So he's bringing the ball to the defender, but it kind of surprises because he sweeps his hands up and then just kind of shoots it over them. And it's not a common move, but it's one that Duncan has used a lot over the years. And Joel, we're on the court, and Joel all of a sudden is doing it, and doing it very well. Anytime someone's hand is down, he's drawing a foul. If not, he's just elevating right over it and putting it in. And we'd never seen him do that before. And all the coaches are looking at each other, one says to the other, like, "Did you teach him that?" And they're like, "No." "Did you teach him that?" I'm like, "No." And he just was watching Tim Duncan, and all of a sudden could do it and execute it very well. And there's a lot of those types of stories. He's an incredibly intelligent person, and his ability to pick up the game has been phenomenal. And so you watch him, from day one, and I wrote about this on my site on Cleaning the Glass in one of my film sessions, but just kind of pointing out just little things that he does. We were talking about the importance of intellect defensively for big men. Little things that he does where he understands the read he has to make. He pinches in at the right time to help and gets back out to somebody. Just things that young players wouldn't do, and that's what stuff he was doing from the moment he first stepped on an NBA court. Certainly being able to watch basketball helped him, but it's still, he's just always been way ahead of the curve in that sense. So, you take a smart coaching staff doing smart things, learning how to teach players smartly, and then you put them with players who are smart. And it's a pretty great combination.
Yeah. Hey, Tom, I want to pick up one thing that Ben said about Brett.
Go ahead.
And playing in that style, the teaching points. And did you grow up a Connecticut fan, Tom?
No, I was actually a UNC fan.
Wow. Do you remember the Donnell Marshall Connecticut teams?
Oh yeah.
So they played the Gators in the.
What kind of wow was that? Was that a condescending wow? Like what?
No.
Wow?
No. A lot of fans from North Carolina live everywhere. I just was surprised.
I thought you were like, wow.
Like
my grandparents lived in North Carolina, and they sent me for Christmas I would get all sorts of Carolina stuff. So I became a Carolina fan, and also I like their colors.
It's funny how that works. Do you know why Mark Stein roots for Manchester City so crazily?
No. I have no idea.
Well, you know he loves Man City, right?
Oh yeah, of course.
Okay.
How do you not?
Right, of course. So he had to spend a summer with his grandparents in Israel, and I asked him the story. He said his grandmother knew he was coming for the summer, and she knew he was crazy about sports. So she went to some local bookstore there and said, I need magazines about sports, whatever, because he's going to be alone a lot here, and he's got to read something. And all they had were English Premier League and soccer, European soccer magazines. And one, I guess, was focused on Man City, and he fell in love. So yeah, our allegiances so frequently fall back to that. So I'm not surprised at all. And by the way, you rooted for a hell of a team for a long time. But Jim Calhoun's teams at Connecticut, starting with those years, really were incredible. I remember they played the Gators in the Sweet 16 in '94. I was there in Miami, and I was really close with the staff because I coached some players on the team. Starting center for the Gators, played for me in high school for 4 years, and I was Lon Kruger and Ron Stewart, real mentors to me, and R.C. Buford was an assistant on that staff, and I spent a ton of time with those coaches. And in listening to them talk about the game prep, they were petrified at how they're going to be able to keep up with Connecticut's pace game, make or miss. They raced when everyone else ran. And they didn't use those words, but that's what they meant. And the whole idea was, if we don't get blown out the first 5 minutes, we'll have a chance. Well, they almost got blown out. They could not keep up. And so remember that, and fast forward to a friend of mine who's the godfather of my kids, who's a former very good player and great coach. And he was watching film of our team. We were trying to teach them to play really fast, his high school team that I was volunteering to help out with him. And we were watching another team that was playing much faster than us. And he said, look at their faces when they would change ends on video. And you could see a look of concern on the other team's face, almost like of effort. It was like an effort face. They were unbelievably focused on kicking our ass down the court. And our guys running back like they were about to go pick up the newspaper from the end of the driveway. And I've never forgotten that. And so I teach players to race, not run, sprint. To everyone else is running, you're going to be a racer. And I'm really proud of two of the guys that I've helped, Omri Caspi, who's no longer with Golden State, and Corey Brewer. Those guys fly. They just fly. And that's a teaching point. And when you watch the Sixers play, this is going to Ben's point, they've done a hell of a job at that. Their guys aren't just running, they're racing very often. Now, it helps to know that there's a point guard there that will get them the ball and can get them the ball from anywhere. But Cleveland has that with LeBron, and they don't run and almost never do. And LeBron teams almost never have. It's just something they haven't valued, and I think has personally been a waste for one of LeBron's most incredible gifts, is the ability to 90 feet away is nothing to him. He sees it, he can anticipate it, and he can deliver it. And he's just never really done it very much. Kevin Love is one of the best outlet passes we've ever seen. And he had more in a month with Corey Brewer with the Wolves than he has in a career in the Cavaliers.
Actually, Jade and I did a big number about this. I don't know if Jade, you're on the line right now, but the big number was that he had more, like by far more, like end-to-end football passes, quarterback passes than anybody. It wasn't even close. And I'm with you. Like I remember Eric Spoelstra once asked me, like, who do you think is the most perfect player for our system that we play with LeBron and Dwayne? And I was like, man, Kevin Love, because of his ability to move the ball, huge lengths, and shoot the three and rebound. If they would run, right, and leak out. And Al Horford was brought up too. Al Horford, Chris Bosh obviously was a quintessential big for them. You brought up LeBron James. I want to switch gears real quick. Yep. Ben, you worked alongside, not physically, but remotely, you worked alongside Nate McMillan last night. He took Victor Oladipo out with 2 fouls, and I think crippled a lot of their chances to win that
2
game
minutes
last
into the
night.
game.
Yeah, and he's fouled out once in his entire career, and he's their best player, and not even close. He's their best player. Right. What do the numbers say, or your research? What does it inform you about foul rates and when coaches should take out? Because Coach, I'll just let you take the wheel here. What did you think about that move?
Yeah, I was really upset. I want to hear Ben's, I don't know what analysis Ben's done, but I tweeted at that moment that probably is going to cost them the game. These teams are very even, and Oladipo is the most valuable player in Indiana by a considerable margin. And they just aren't going to be able to come back from a big deficit against that team, especially on the road. I just felt like he'll probably end up with 4 or 5 fouls. Turns out he ended up with 3. And they got in a hole. They were down 16-1. Game over. Game over. They never even tied the game. They had chances to. But it never should have been that ugly. He just, I don't know why coaches do it. But I want to hear what Ben studied it analytically at all.
Yeah, so generally I've been on your side. I mean, I think if you think about it just through a simple logical framework, you can say that you're never going to save a player playing time by taking him out with foul trouble, right? Like he's never going to play more because of that. You're making him play less, and you're trading off those minutes that you're losing from him for the ability to play him at the end of a game if the game happens to be close.
Right. There's a lot of saving him for something that might not happen.
Exactly.
Which seems, yeah.
There's a lot of ifs there. It might not even happen, and it might not even happen because he's not playing, right? So it might have been a close game that is no longer a close game because he was on the bench. So I've tended to be much more on the side of it makes more sense to be
keeping them in there.
Keep them in, give them much more leeway. In discussing this with coaches, I think that the place where it gets tricky is around how the teams change how the players in particular change their style of play, because of foul trouble, because of that fear. So if you leave Oladipo in and now Cleveland is targeting him and Oladipo feels like he can't pick up a third foul because then it's real trouble. Is he playing bad defense, and is that now making him a worse player? So there is much more complexity to it than it seems kind of at first blush. I still, feel like coaches tend to have too quick hooks, especially with players who are not foul prone, who are perimeter players.
Right.
Oladipo doesn't foul very much. All that said, I've talked about this in the past. I think that this is kind of like a rule change, but this is one of the reasons why I hate the concept of fouling out of the game. Is it puts coaches in position to have this feeling of like, certainly from a criticism standpoint, it's a lose-lose situation for them. If you leave him in and then he can't play in crunch time because of that, you get raked over the coals. If you take him out in this situation, you also get raked over the coals. And for me, it's not clear to me why there should be such a stiff penalty for having that 6th foul. I think you can still have a strong penalty.
It's called free throws.
Right. And so you can do things
the
that are like
penalty is free throws.
Foul 6 and up is a technical, and then also whatever the normal penalty would be. So you can really kind of make it so that teams aren't just hacking everyone once that rule changes. But I think that for me, it just creates it's weird that we're talking about how a game was decided by someone picking up a 2nd foul early in the game, because whatever the coaching decision was, the ref also had to make a decision. Now you're putting the ref in a spot where they have to decide whether they should make the right call or decide the entire game. And it just seems like a silly thing to have end up with that kind of impact. So that's just kind of one of my little pet things, is that I just think that there's certainly, given the rules that you have, there's certainly, the right ways to think about it and analysis that you can do. But for me, I would just love to see that rule change.
We got to end things right there. But if you want to continue listening, Count the Dings fans, go to our Patreon. Subscribe there and you'll get kind of the overtime. We geek out some more with Ben Falk and David Thorpe. Go to patreon.com/countthedings. Support the show and get access to all of our stuff by signing up and supporting us. Ben's great. Coach Thorpe is great. Get all of it at patreon.com/countthedings. Thank you.